Hey guys, Luke here back on Sean's channel. Today I'm going to be profiling my Cyber Dragon Genesys deck profile. Genesys is a new Yu-Gi-Oh format that relies on a point system in order to encourage deck building. Not every card is worth points, but the more powerful cards will be worth a certain amount. The whole point of Genesys is that you cannot build a deck that has more than 100 points in it. So I built this Cyber Dragon deck that has the perfect amount with 100 points that I built as a going second fusion based strategy, because of course with Genesys format there is no pendulum monsters and no link monsters, so it's a lot different from what all of my other Cyber Dragon builds have ever looked like, but I still think it'll be fun to explore this topic. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into it. This is my Cyber Dragon Genesys deck profile. Starting things off, 3 copies of Cyber Dragon. Now this is a going second build, and what I really wanted to do was I wanted to try and make this around fusion summoning. Not only with using some more powerful fusion cards itself, but also by contact fusing. With the likes of Clockwork Night, I think it's definitely really important that we maximize our copies of Cyber Dragons in this build. Just because we need the particular Cyber Dragon name on the field with a bunch of fusion monsters so we can contact fuse away for our Fortress Dragon. So I think it is definitely really important for us to maximize 3 copies of Cyber Dragon. Around 1 copy of Jormungandr. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of Jormungandr, but I do think he's definitely a lot better in Genesys format than he is in the actual TCG. So I did try to throw him in, especially because this is primarily a going second build. So I do think that he is worth the run, but only 1 copy is more than enough for what you need. We run 3 copies of Cyber Dragon Core. Core is still a combo starter, but Core is no longer a 1-card combo with this format because unfortunately we aren't able to link him away in order to get those crazy end boards that we're able to do in TCG. However, he is still pivotal for a bunch of 1.5 card combos or even 2-card combos, so you still need to maximize your copies of him because he is an essential piece of the puzzle. Definitely run 3 copies of Core. Sticking with my ratios, I still think is gospel. I think 2 copies of Herz and 1 copy of Nachster is still the most ideal. I can definitely see where you guys are coming from by wanting to run more copies of Nachster, and if you do, absolutely go ahead. This deck isn't a tight 40 cards, so if you want to throw in an extra copy of Nachster, that's absolutely fine. I just still find in my playtesting that we were able to optimize this deck as well as we could with just this ratio. So I don't fully think it's necessary to go deep in with a bunch of different Cyber Dragon names. I know we talked about we do want them so that we're able to contact fuse away our opponent's board. However, that is not always the case because we're not always going to be opening a copy of Clockwork Night. So I think that this ratio right here is more than enough for what you need for the deck to function. I run 2 copies of Cyberdark Chimera and 1 copy of Cyberdark Wurm. I still don't want to lean too heavy into the Cyberdark side of the deck, so this is the ratio I actually came up with. Wurm, of course, you only need to run a 1 because his effect is a once per duel effect. But the reason why I'm running an extra copy of Chimera as opposed to my regular just 1 copy is mostly because with Chimera, we still want to do the typical combo using Core to search Realm and get Chimera in order to do an additional normal summon of him, which is absolutely fine. But one thing we definitely do want to prioritize in this deck is actually using Chimera's second effect, where when he's sent to the graveyard, you can send 1 Cyberdark monster from your deck to the graveyard with a different name from cards already in the grave. In order to get that Wurm in rotation as quickly as possible, I think it is of course very important. So I think that this ratio is the most optimal that you can be. Then the last machine of the main deck, we run 1 copy of Therion King Regulus. We can't always get our way going second, so it's important for us that we have some kind of way to protect ourselves with some negation. So I think Regulus is definitely really good at that. So I like to run them at 1 copy. We're going to go into the hand traps now, and this is where the points start coming in. We run 3 copies of Mulcharmy Fuwalos. Fuwalos is 7 points each, so of course if we're running a playset that takes us up to 21 points, which is a big chunk, but I do think that Fuwalos is very important because we really want to go second, and you can never really get the full advantage out of your Mulcharmy monsters if you are playing a going first deck. So I definitely think Fuwalos is worth the 21 points to be running at a playset. More points now, we are running 3 copies of Mulcharmy Meowls. This is great that we got this reprinted in the Legendary 5Ds decks. Meowls is of course another Mulcharmy that helps us get a few draws if our opponent is special summoning from the graveyard. Meowls is worth 3 points each, so of course we're playing a playset, it takes us up to 9 points, and going hand in hand with our Fuwalos, it means that so far we've spent 30 points, which isn't even a third of the points that we have, which I think is still pretty good, but they are definitely important points to spend because we want to get as much draw power as we possibly can from this deck, especially if we're going second. And who knows, maybe your opponent might fear the Charmy so much that if you're able to activate Fuwalos and even chain Meowls, they might even just pass their turn right there. So I definitely think it is really important to run 3 copies of Meowls in this deck also. Going into the spells now, 3 copies of Cyber Emergency. This is more so just a consistency card because Cyber Emergency allows us to add any Cyber Dragon monster from our deck to our hand. We're able to search it off a core, and it's just a good way for us to get easy access to some of our most essential monsters. So I definitely think 3 copies of Emergency is really important. Some other important Cyber spells we're able to search off a core is of course Cyber Repair Plant, Cyber Revsystem, and Cyberload Fusion. Revsystem is a great monster reborn for Cyber Dragon from the graveyard. Repair Plant is another consistency card because we're able to search with its effect if we have Cyber Dragons in our grave. And Cyberload Fusion is great because it's the only searchable fusion spell. If we're not counting the power bond, we're able to search off of Chimera's effect. So I like to run it, but if you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. I just think that these 3 cards are really good for us to get some advantage depending on the situation because we're able to search these cards off of course normal summon effect. We run 2 copies of Cyberdark Realm. Realm is a great card, but unfortunately it is not a 1-card combo anymore. It's great because it allows us to search a Cyberdark monster when it's activated, and we can do an additional normal summon during our turn of a Cyberdark monster with this face on the field. But it's not as powerful here as it is in TCG, but I still think it's worth a run. So 2 copies of Realm is pretty good in my opinion. The last of the fusion spells now, 2 copies of Power Bond and 1 copy of Fusion Substitute. I never ran Fusion Substitute in any of my other Cyber Dragon builds, even though a lot of people said that was important because I did run Jormungandr in there. But honestly, I never really saw the appeal until this format. Just because we are way more reliant on fusion monsters in this format than we are in regular TCG, so I thought Fusion Substitute will be good for this build. And Power Bond really needs no introduction. It's a fantastic fusion spell for machine type monsters, and we're able to search it off of our Cyberdark Chimera. So I think 2 copies of Power Bond and 1 copy of Fusion Substitute is the ideal ratio. Just a one-of that I think is pretty good, not really essential to be running, is Machine Duplication. This card makes a lot more sense in my other builds because I run it along with 3 copies of Thrust. But since Thrust actually costs too many points, I decided not to run it. But the Machine Duplication is still fairly good. It's not the most essential card in the world, but if you're able to pull off a good Machine Dupe play, then it is absolutely worth it. So I decided just to throw it in case we get some luck. Now, 3 copies of Clockwork Night. Thank God this does not cost any points, because honestly, if it did, I don't really think that this deck would be viable at all. But Clockwork Night is very great because when it's face up on the field, all face up monsters on the field become machine type monsters, which is fantastic because it's essentially a board wipe of all your opponent's face up monsters if you have Cyber Dragon on the field, because you can contact fuse them all the way into Fortress Dragon and get them up to a ridiculous amount of attack. Of course, we can't search Clockwork Night in this deck because Clockwork Night, the Link monster, is banned in this format. That's why I want to maximize it. I definitely think it is the right choice to be running it in this deck. Now, the final points in the main deck. We run 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. Droplet is 10 points each, so running a playset sets you back 30 points, but I still think it is very, very important. Droplet is a fantastic board wipe. It can really help us out a lot, and so far in this build we've used 60 points, 21 on Fuwalos, 9 on Meowls, and 30 on Droplet. So it's really, really great that in this deck alone we're only using up 60 points, so it gives us a bit more freedom to boost up our extra deck as well. So I think Droplet is definitely really, really important to run at 3 copies. And then the final card of the deck, 3 copies of Ultimate Slayer. This is another great board breaker because it doesn't cost any points. And considering that we have a lot more room in the extra deck now, considering the fact that some of our main monsters cost too many points, we have to make some difficult decisions. Ultimate Slayer is great because the targets for it, including Garura, Aggregator, and Malong, don't cost any points either, giving us plenty of space, so I think it is definitely worth it to run in this deck. Now, going into the extra deck now, we run only 1 copy of Cyber Dragon Nova and 1 copy of Cyber Dragon Infinity. Nova doesn't cost any points, however Infinity is a whopping 20 points, which kind of sucks, but I understand it because, you know, a lot of other decks can actually take advantage of Infinity. So it makes sense that this powerful boss monster would cost you a few points. So it's unfortunate for us, but I do understand it. We run 1 copy of Anomaly Vimana. Vimana is pretty good. I didn't want to run an extra Nova just for the sake of running an extra Nova. I wanted to get a little bit more creative, so I think Vimana is a good shout for that, because all it needs is 2 level 5 monsters in order to go into him. And he does have a very powerful interruption because once per turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, you're able to quick effect attach 2 materials from this card, then negate the activation, which I think is fantastic. It costs no points at all. So I do think it's definitely worth the run in this build in particular. Now let's round off the rest for points with another very powerful AA-ZEUS monster. We of course still run a copy of ZEUS. ZEUS costs us another 20 points, bringing the point total this deck to 100. You guys already know what Zeus does. You already know how good he is in every deck that plays Xyz. So it's no shock that he still made the cut into this list right here. It was a very difficult decision between putting in either Zeus or Typhon in this build. Considering that Typhon is only 10 points, so we would be able to have an additional 10 points to kind of play around with. I did seriously consider it, but I did decide that just in the end, Zeus is just overall a very good card for this build. Because if we get machine locked with Nachster's effect, Zeus still falls under that criteria, whereas unfortunately Typhon is a fiend. So I think Zeus is still worth running in this build to round off all the rest for points. Let's go into the fusions now. 3 copies of Rampage Dragon. Rampage is absolutely insane, especially if you're bringing it out of a power bond. Having this card be able to attack an additional 2 times by dumping 2 light machine monsters to the graveyard is insane, especially if he's brought out with 4200 attack. So I decided to maximize him out. He doesn't cost any points and we had more room in the extra deck to play with. I think he's just too good in this format to not run at 3 copies in the extra deck. We only run 2 copies of Fortress Dragon. This is our only contact fusing monster that we have in the extra deck because of course Mega Fleet Dragon you can't play in this format. I mean you can, but it'll be pointless because there's no such thing as an extra monster zone in this format. But Fortress is definitely your MVP if we have Clockwork Night face on the field, so I do think he's worth running at 2 copies in this build. Mechanical Dawn is great if we're stuck going first, because he's a good spell or trap card in the gate. If we bring him out using Power Bond, we don't have to take any Power Bond damage, which is very good because his attack is 0. But I would mainly only use him if we're stuck in the grind game or if we're stuck going first. But overall, he's not as helpful in this format as he is in regular TCG. And I'm sure all OG Cyber Dragon players can rejoice because I do run Cyber Twin Dragon and Cyber End Dragon in this deck. Look it, we had more extra deck space, so I figured why not place them with a really cool OGs. They cost no points at all and they're really cool, so why not throw them in? It's as Zane intended. So 1 copy each of those guys, and then we're going to round this deck off with the Ultimate Slayer targets. We run 1 copy of Malong, 1 Aggregator and 1 Garura. These are just the cards that gain us some advantage if we send them using Ultimate Slayer. Garura lets us draw a card, Aggregator can negate a face-up card, and Malong can bounce, which can all be really helpful depending on what your opponent is playing. So I definitely think it is worth running these guys in the extra deck because Ultimate Slayer is one hell of a card in this format. So that does it for the build. This is the first Genesys deck I've actually built and played with. I'll be honest, I'm not really the biggest fan of the Genesys format. I do think it is a good idea and can be fun in concept, but I still feel like the best decks in TCG are still topping Genesys anyways. I mean, Dracotel is fantastic. Vanquish Soul, they kind of found new life in Genesys, so of course that's great for that deck. I do like seeing that the format is very diverse, but I don't know, I think I need to just experiment with it a little bit more before I can confidently say that I like the format. Just want to do a quick little recap on the points that we spent to get it to 100. Fuwalos is 7 points each, we run 3 of them, so he is 21 points. Meowls is 3 points each, we use 3 of them, so it is 9 points. Droplet is 10 points each, we use 3 of them, so it's 30 points. Zeus is 20 points, and Infinity is 20 points. That's 21 plus 9 plus 30 plus 20 plus 20, gives us a total of 100. So we completely maxed out our points using this deck alone. If you guys want to build this deck in real life, please be sure to use the affiliate links down in the description below. By using those affiliate links, you'll help directly support out the channel to help myself and Sean to keep bringing you guys these videos. Another way you can support us is if you guys can consider becoming a channel member. We want to give a big shout out to our members, John Cran, Americumbert, Johnny, Dragons God 679, and RPS and OB. We really appreciate your continued support, so I want to give you a big thank you for that. And for everyone else, if you can just subscribe to the channel, like the video and leave a comment, it all really helps in the long run. That's it for now, until next time, thanks for watching.